Hi guys, BellaDonna Black here, and here are 5 verified creepy stories. So, turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let's begin. Number 1. My mum left my dad when I was 9. I have 3 older sisters. My dad was an abusive alcoholic. He used to beat us, especially my mum. He would twist hickory switches together and bake them in the oven before beating us with them. My mum finally got the courage to leave him. We stayed in a shelter for a while for abused women and their children. After my mum saved up enough money for us to move, we moved into a mobile home. Our first night in our new place, 2 of my sisters and I were watching TV. My mum was in the kitchen and my oldest sister was cleaning out the bathtub. My dad came through the front door and put his fingers to his mouth, saying, "Shh." We were very afraid of him, so we didn't say anything. He went into the kitchen and said, "Carrie." My mum turned around and he showed her a gun. She screamed and ran down the hall towards the back door. He told her if she didn't stop screaming, he would kill the kids too. My 2 sisters and I ran out the front to the neighbour's house. We told them what was happening, and it dawned on us our older sister wasn't there. She got there maybe a minute later. When she heard her dad's voice, she lay down in the tub. My dad shot my mum 5 times, killing her. My oldest sister said he went back up the hall calling our names. That's when she jumped up and ran out. I'm 38 now, and he is still in prison. Number 2. This happened around July of 2014. Some backdrop. I'm a 19-year-old female, and at the time of this event, I was 18. Me and my friends live in a small town of Stony Creek, Ontario. Living in Canada, we generally are not very concerned about rapists, pedophiles, and murderers. It was the summer before we headed off to university. We all just wanted to have a really good time. So, the 5 of us decided that we would have a sleepover at my friend's house. He lived around a nice, somewhat suburban neighbourhood. So, 9:30 rolls around, and here we are blasting music, drinking, and just generally having a good time. At this point of the night, me and my friend decide that we should totally go get a late night snack. Since I had drank 2 coolers, I could not drive, because the G2 regulations of driving demanded that we have a 0 alcohol blood level. No worries, we thought. A local Subway restaurant was just about 15 minutes away from where we lived. So, me and my friend were just walking on the sidewalk. My friend, being a little drunk, decides to talk in a really loud and obnoxious voice about how hungry she is. Sadly, the alcoholic high that I was feeling begins to fade quickly, leaving me to contend with a drunken, overactive teenager. As we are walking, we hear rustling. We look up to see a man sitting on his porch, just staring at us. This guy looked vaguely familiar to me, but I just could not pinpoint where I had seen him before. He looked relatively tall, had black hair, and was a tad bit overweight. As we were passing him, I noticed that he kept on looking at my friend. I kind of shrugged it off and thought he found her attractive, since she was short and looked way young to be 18. Older men were just typically drawn to her. As we were walking past the small white house, I hear him call after us. I turn around, and there he is, in a grey shirt and black sweatpants, just staring really creepily at her. As we came to a stop, he proceeded to ask us where we were going. Before I could muster a response, my friend happily tells him that we were going to Subway for a little snack. She does not usually act this sociable before, and is being totally oblivious to the weird vibes that this creep is giving off to me. As his piercing gaze lands back onto my friend, he then goes on to ask how old she is. Now, I really start to feel scared. I know when an older man asks about a young girl's age, nothing good can come from the situation. I try to signal with my eyes to her not to answer, when she stupidly blurts out that she is 18 years old. The creep's eyes flicker for a second from her response. He tells her that she looks younger than 18, to where she replies that she often hears that quite a bit. Now I just want to leave, badly. This guy is approaching closer to my friend, and I grab her arm, pulling her towards my side. The guy finally looks back at me and asks us if we want to come join him on his porch. I quickly muster a no, as I try to push her down the sidewalk. But before I can turn around, he looks back to my friend and says, in a deep, raspy voice, that he will see her again before the night is over. I look down at her, and the terror is clearly drawn on her face. Now, I know we need to leave. I haul her in front of me, and we speed walk the subway, which is just about 6 minutes away. As I look back, I see the creep staring her up and down. Just before he looks to me, he opens his mouth in a shiver-inducing smirk, which bares his teeth. He then proceeded to nod and turn back to his porch steps. I am basically running by now, carrying my pale-looking friend with me as we walk into the subway. Quickly, I recite the orders to the lady behind the counter, urging her with my eyes to pick up the pace because I just want to get back to my friends. As the woman goes about making her subs, I feel a shiver run across my skin. I turn my head to the side as I look out the window to see that guy again. He is right outside of Subway, and he's just staring at us with his eyebrows drawn together. Now, I have no idea what to do. How can we leave peacefully if he is just outside? What if he comes in? His gaze then moves to my friend. His pupils seem to dilate, and I know for a fact that he is undressing her with his eyes. I then notice he is slightly touching his crotch area as he continues to stare at her. I know that this creep has gone too fucking far. I turn back to the lady behind the counter and put my fingers towards his sicko. As she turns her neck to look at him, her eyes widen. She stops making her subs and just leaves abruptly to go to the back room. The creep notices something is off and he just turns and leaves. When the lady comes back, she abruptly hands me a poster. The name on the poster said he was Keith. He was convicted rapist in Hamilton. He sexually assaulted a young boy in a park and raped a blind woman. He even raped and beat a young woman in her parents' basement. The poster listed the details of his parole. He was not allowed to be alone with children under the age of 16, and he could not go to any community parks or pools. His curfew was 11 p.m, and unfortunately, when we looked at the time, it was only 10:08 p.m. This guy was listed as likely being able to reoffend again. The thing that really creeped me out was his unnatural obsession with young boys and girls. That is why he is so fixated on my friend. We did not know whether to notify his parole officer, since he technically did not breach any of the conditions of his parole. We also did not want to get in trouble from our parents for underage drinking and walking around at night, so we decided to just keep it to ourselves. Shortly after, I called my friend to come pick us up, because there was no way I was walking past his house again. This guy was the epitome of evil. He told a reporter that he calls his condition the devil's curse. He has to meet with a therapist once a week just to keep his sexual urges at bay. Thankfully, he was arrested a few days later for breaching curfew. Creepy rapist? Let's not meet again. Number 3. Back in 2011 to 2012, my mum would regularly hang out with Jack, an older man whose basement we lived in. We were semi-poor and this basement was cheap and basically a separate house. She had recently broke up, again, with my youngest brother's father. It's kind of funny, because Jack was the ex-stepfather for a long time, and they remained kind of close, but he recognised how much of a POS his son was, and was always supportive of my mum. Anyways, one day, when my mother and my brother went over to his house, there was another man He was both friends and business acquaintances with Jack. He did a lot of buying and reselling on sites like eBay and turned a nice profit. The man was quite well off financially, as he had his own construction business, or something along those lines. Since both my mother and the man both saw Jack a lot, they got to know one another, and the man started to ask my mum out on numerous occasions, but she always said no. He would get more and more persistent, even asking her to move in with him, since he knew she was struggling for money, and he had a big house. She said she got a funny feeling from him and would always turn him down. Time passes, unrelated, but almost equally fucked up. Things happen and my mother ends up moving a few times away with her brother and didn't really have much contact with Jack, nor his friend. All is well, at least, until one day I get an almost hysterical call from my mother. She rushes over to my dad's house, where I was living. I was around 15 at the time, and shows me an article. I get a cold, sinking feeling, and a lump forms in my belly. The man who had been pursuing Mum, the man who seemed off, the man I heard about in passing, was convicted of possessing child pornography, the purchasing of an infant, and the rape of said infant. It turns out, the whole time he was pursuing my mother, he was abusing this poor child, and possibly more. It still sickens me and scares me senseless, thinking about the fact this man was around, talked to, and watched my brother, who was 4 at the time. Mum and I both know that it's more than likely that he was using her to get close to my brother. It just goes to show, always listen to your instincts. So, motherfucker, if you manage to make it out of prison alive, let's not meet. For your sake, not mine. Number 4. This isn't really a story I talk about much, mainly because it's something I don't like to dwell on, especially since it has a lot of what if situations. The biggest one being, what if he was never caught? I'm getting way ahead of myself here. I guess the best place to start would be with a little background. I grew up in a super small town. Less than 1,000 people lived there. I think in the last census we had 800 and something. In a small town, the craziest thing that happens is shooting a 12-point buck, or what kind of tires Jimmy put on his truck. People either grew up and moved away, only returning for family events, joined some part of the armed forces, or were there for the rest of their lives. Yeah, it's that kind of town. Since the town was so small, you knew everyone in your grade, and most people in the grades underneath you. We also didn't have the whole popular crowd. Everyone pretty much got along with everyone else. That brings me to the main person in my story. A good friend of mine named Jay. Jay was your typical class clown. He had fiery red hair and his personality made him just a firecracker. He could make anyone laugh and he got along with nearly every person he met. He was just a great person to be around. Our friendship began in middle school. I believe it was 7th grade when I first met him. We had history together and our desks were a little pod, where he sat right next to me. We would copy each other's work, share our snacks, and he made me laugh so hard I couldn't breathe every single day. He was a great friend to have. If someone messed with me, he'd tell them not to pick on his little sister. As we grew up, we stayed decently close. I wouldn't call him a best friend, but we were good friends nonetheless. Right out of high school, Jay went straight to the Marines. He wasn't gone for even a year before he was dishonorably discharged. When he came back, he was slightly different. He didn't tell a single person, as far as I knew, why he was discharged. He didn't talk about the Marines much. Eventually, he became the same old Jay I knew before he left. We became pretty good friends again, picking up right where we left off. At least once a week, Jay would text me and ask me how I was doing. He'd come to my house for parties or just to hang out, and I'd do the same with him. We knew a lot about each other, or at least I thought I did. On a pretty uneventful week in January, Jay texted me about a party he was having at his house and asked if I'd like to come. That was nothing unusual, so of course I accepted. He said it was going to be a small party and there was only an exclusive list of people, so I could only invite someone if I had his permission. I thought that was weird, but just shrugged it off. I figured he just wanted people he really knew. Maybe he's finally going to open up about the Marines, is the one thought that I had that kept me rational of all his odd behaviour. I told Jay that I would be a DD for anyone if need be, since I was pregnant with my son at the time. He was due in roughly 2 months, and I knew I obviously wouldn't be drinking, so I'd make sure anyone would get home safe and sound. Jay said I didn't need to worry about that. It wasn't that kind of party. A couple of days pass and I don't hear from Jay, which isn't unusual, until I see his face on the local news. Jay and 2 of his friends, Stephen and Toby, were arrested for kidnapping, torture, murder, and abuse of a corpse. I immediately opened up an internet browser and started looking at the news articles that were all over our local news. The basic gist of everything that happened was as followed. Jay knew about this drug dealer that was dealing near his home. He didn't approve of it and he planned to murder to rid the world of his evil. His first step was to set up a drug deal with the victim. That wasn't a hard task, since he was a friend of a friend. He then convinced Stephen and Toby to go along with him. They met the victim at the location where the men kidnapped him. Jay had the man in the back seat and began beating him while the other 2 were in the front. There was actually one time they had to stop the car as the man got out and had to forcefully pull him back into the car. They took him into the woods where they began to torture him. Jay did most of the torture, with a little help from Stephen, by assaulting the man with his fist, choking him almost to the point of unconsciousness, and beating him with a metal bar. Jay's idea of torturing the man was to get information out of him on where he was getting his drugs. Jay wanted to get all of the names this man knew and continue to go up the ladder until he had murdered all of the dealers in this line before finding another and continuing on until he was caught. He had it all planned out in his head on how he was going to do it. At one point, after Jay had enough of torture, he slit the victim's throat and stabbed him repeatedly in the chest with a knife they had brought. After Jay was sure the victim was dead, they dumped the body in a field, only for them to return the next day and dismember the man. They had decapitated him, then cut off his arms, hands, legs, and feet, leaving his torso without any limbs attached to it. After they thought he was cut up enough, they disposed of the body in a couple of different states. Some of the places included a landfill, the field where they cut him up, a garbage can behind a motel, and other locations they never disclosed. After a couple of days, Toby couldn't take it and ended up confessing to the murders to the police. He told them every gory detail and he disclosed all of the locations he knew about. The police arrested Jay and Stephen, and after showing them the evidence, they pleaded guilty to the murder as well. The head, hands and feet have never been found. Jay was sentenced to life in prison. Stephen was sentenced to 45 years, while Toby was sentenced to 35. Needless to say, I was shocked. Everyone was blowing up my phone, asking if I'd heard about Jay and what I thought about it. I didn't know what to think about it. I was still dazed it had happened. The day before the party, I text Jay's roommate, Jack. Our text conversation is as follows. With everything that happened, I'm just going to guess you aren't doing any party this weekend, right? What are you talking about? You know, everything with Jay. It wouldn't make sense to have the party he was planning. It would be kind of a creepy Jack. I know what happened with Jay, but I have no idea about a party. Jez said there was a party at your house this weekend. It was going to be a small get-together. There was no party planned for this weekend, at least none I was aware of. I was supposed to go out of town and visit my family, but with everything that happened, I've cancelled those plans. I texted quite a few other mutual friends of ours. None of them had heard of a party either. I remember Jess saying it was just a small party, but not even his absolute best friend had heard of it. There are many times I wonder what would have happened if Toby never would have confessed. What if I had went to Jez's party that no one else heard of? The possibilities of what could have happened are endless. After I found out there wasn't a party, I changed my number and I moved completely different town. I go back every now and again, but I don't tell anyone I visit until I show up, just in case Jay gets paroled and wants to finish our party. Number 5. This is a story that my dad shared with me. He grew up in the small suburb community of Stowe, Ohio, with his parents and older sister. Across the street lived a boy named Richard Wade Cooey. He was the same age as my dad and described him as a scrawny, red-headed troublemaker. He would spit on people as they walked by and even set a house on fire in the neighbourhood and blamed it on a kid who had special needs. Nothing he did as a child, however, could compare to the crime he committed when he was only 19 years old. My dad had just started his sophomore year of college when he heard the news. Richard and his friends Clinton and Kenneth were throwing pieces of concrete off a local bridge onto the interstate when one of them struck the vehicle of a 21-year-old Wendy Offerendo. Her friend, 20-year-old Dawn McCreary, was also in the car. There were Shorty sisters who had just gotten off work at a local restaurant. At this point, Kenneth decided he had enough and went home. This is when Richard and Clinton came up with their evil scheme. Both of the young men approached the girls, offering them help, offering to give them a ride. They drove the girls to a shopping centre where they told them to call their parents and let them know that they were alright. The two of them forced the girls back into the car, tied their hands together, and drove them to a field behind the local mall, where they raped, stabbed, and tortured them for 3 grueling hours. They abandoned their bodies in the field, but only after they carved large X's on their stomachs. Richard and Clinton then decided they wanted to sell the girls' clothing and jewellery to make some extra cash. When Richard couldn't find a buyer for the items, he burned them in his backyard, which woke up my grandparents. My grandfather called the police to report what he thought was yet another neighbourhood disturbance from Richard. The police gathered the items for evidence, and after finding Wendy's abandoned car, they arrested Richard and began the investigation. Clinton and Richard were both arrested and charged with the murders. They found a bloody pocket knife used to stab Wendy in the neck in Clinton's pocket when he was arrested, and some of the burned items still had traces of the girl's blood. Since Clinton was only 17, he was spared a death sentence and currently is serving life in prison. Richard, however, was given the death penalty. On October 14, 2003, at 10 a.m, he was executed by lethal injection. Wendy's family was present at this execution. Every time I visit my grandparents and look across the street at that house, I can't help but to get chills. Richard, I'm glad we never met, and I'm certainly glad my dad was smart enough to not become your friend growing up. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment below. All feedback, good or otherwise, is always appreciated. If you have any creepy stories of your own, or have any topics that you would like me to cover, feel free to send them in via any of my social media. You can find all links to my social media in the description below. Until next time, guys, make sure you lock your doors, stay safe, and I'll see you next video.